This is a terrible story that happened to me while working as a dog sitter. One day, I found a person on the internet who said he would pay a lot of money for a dog sitter. And since his house was not far away, I decided to take care of his dog for 3 days. When I arrived in front of his house, there was a "Beware of Dogs" sign on the door, and the smell of rotting food was in the air. I knocked on the door and heard a man's voice from inside. He said,
"The door is open, come in."
And then I heard a barking sound. The barking sounded like that of a vicious dog. I got a little anxious. When I opened the door and went in, I couldn't see anyone in the house. I said,
"Are you there?"
And I could hear the dog panting in the living room. The sound came closer and closer. While I was looking around for the owner, the dog appeared out of nowhere and I yelled out in surprise. The only thing is, it wasn't a dog. It was a person crawling on all fours and approaching me like they are a pet. He appeared to be a man in his 30s. There was a dog collar around his neck. He was also wearing fur-like fabric that covered his entire body and had an artificial tail attached to his buttocks. He said to me,
"You're the one who will take care of me for the next 3 days? Nice to meet you."
He shook his butt wildly and his tail wagged. Then he continued walking on all fours, now toward the kitchen, and said,
"The food is in here. These are meats that are hard to find."
He opened the refrigerator door by moving his hand like a dog moving its paw. Inside it was a pile of large, deep red chunks of meat. For some reason, I got goosebumps and took a step back. He then ran up to me, slammed his head into my leg, and screamed,
"Are you going to keep standing there blankly like that? Pat my head! Pat my head!"
I was so confused and horrified that I screamed out. Then he started licking my hand. A few seconds later, a terrible stench hit my nose and I immediately felt dizzy and nauseous. I pushed him away and started running to the door when he started barking. His bark was startlingly dog-like. I kicked open the front door and started running. While running, I made the mistake of looking back. He was chasing after me on all fours at incredible speed. I was so shocked that I felt like I was going to faint. I screamed out like crazy for help.
"Help! There's a crazy dog here!"
People stuck their heads out of their windows to look and see what was happening. And when they saw the man running towards me, their eyes widened. Before I knew it, the crazy dog man was in front of me, and he started panting and lifting his lips to bare his teeth. I could see his dark gums and yellow, large teeth. He growled and lunged at me, my legs shaking like crazy. At that moment, a man came running with a baseball bat and yelled at the crazy dog guy to go away. The crazy guy saw him and started barking wildly. The crazy dog guy went after the man and bit his leg, and he panicked and hit the crazy dog guy on the head with a bat. Thankfully, that made him run away, making a noise similar to a dog's whining. The whole scene was unbelievable, and I was so shaken up that I could barely catch my breath. The man had teeth marks and some blood on his leg, but he said it was not a serious injury and went into his house to bandage it. I thanked him countless times, and he said to me,
"This is not the first incident like this. In the past, a young man went to that house to work as a pet sitter and was bitten by that crazy guy, leaving him with 30 stitches on his leg. And that crazy guy has been to jail once before. Once that crazy guy bites you, he won't let you go unless you hit him on the head. Remember, you should really hit him on the head with all your might."
After that, I never worked as a dog sitter again. I sometimes wonder, who was that crazy guy and what is he doing now?
My name is Humaira. I'm 21 years old. I'm a big fan of your YouTube channel. I am from Bangladesh and I live in the Mymensingh district. I want to share a horror story that happened to me. This story is from when I was 10 years old and I lived in Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh. At the time, I lived in an apartment with my parents and my 2 brothers. It had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, and a balcony. The apartment was a bit small for my family's size, but due to some financial issues, we had to manage. One day, my uncle, who is my mom's brother, came to our house to visit us. He came in the afternoon and spent some time with us. We chatted and watched TV, but it was night, and at around 8 p.m., I started feeling sleepy. I had to get up at 6:30 a.m. for school. I was kind of lazy, and I would always go to sleep at 8 p.m. So, like normal, I was just watching TV and starting to drift off to sleep. Right as I fell asleep, I heard my mom telling my uncle to stay at our house for the night. I don't remember the time exactly, but it was around midnight when I woke up. I had fallen asleep in my parents' room, but my mom didn't wake me up and just let me sleep in this room, and she was sleeping next to me. My dad must have been sleeping with my brothers in the other room. I was trying to fall back asleep, but I couldn't and didn't know why. I looked around, and since the door was open, from down the hallway, I could see a tall shadow figure. There was a long corridor between the room I was in and where it was standing, and the shadow figure was peeking around the corner like it was playing with me. I was scared to death, but I didn't want to wake up my mom. Since he was supposed to be staying over, I thought it must just be my uncle. It didn't really make sense that he would be up at midnight staring down the hallway, but I just figured it was him since that made the most sense. Once I decided it was him, I wasn't afraid anymore and eventually fell back asleep, though the figure never stopped staring down the hall. I still don't understand why I thought that figure was my uncle, but as it turns out, when I woke up that morning, I learned that my uncle had actually not stayed the night. I was scared out of my mind. To this day, I still don't know what it was that was looking at me from down the hallway that night.
This happened 2 months ago. I live in Myanmar. It's a beautiful country. It was another normal day at school. Usually, I wake up at 5:30 a.m. I get home from school by 1 p.m. After school, I was home alone. This was normal because my dad usually didn't stay home often. I was bored, so I invited my cousin and my best friend over to play games and watch Wansee videos. A few hours later, somebody was knocking at the door. My first thought was that it was my mom, except she usually has a key to get in. I looked through the window and it was a grown man. He looked like he was in his mid-40s. He was tall and his hair was messy. I ignored him and didn't answer the door. Later on, I stupidly left the house because I wanted some snacks from the convenience store. And of course, the man was there with a pocket knife looking like he might attack me. Since there were bricks near me, I threw one at him and it somehow hit him on the head and made him fall down. There was a van next to me that seemed like it was his, and when I looked inside, there was a 16-year-old girl tied up. I was 12 at the moment, so this was very scary for me. I untied her and then quickly called the cops. Once they got there, a few moments later, he was captured. The girl told me that she was also going to get some snacks. It was so strange because she was so unlucky to get caught, then lucky that I happened to find her. My friend and my cousin still don't even know about this because they were busy playing Fortnite and stayed at the house. I can't help but wonder what would have happened to that girl and me if those bricks hadn't been there.
This is the first ever creepy thing that had happened to me. Or rather, the first time I truly saw something really creepy. I was 12 at the time that it happened. On Mondays, our dismissal was at 5 p.m. I hated it so much because it was so late, and I was also assigned to be a classroom cleaner along with some other kids in my class. So that's why you can expect me to still be at school at 5:30 p.m. A short description of our school. I went to a private Catholic school, and besides our school court, there was a gate, and behind that was what they call the residence, where the nuns and priests would stay. It was old and rusty with gray concrete walls. People love to make rumors about it since it was very old and some nuns have died in there. Our classroom is located on the 3rd floor. The hallways are like terraces, so when you look down, you can get a view of the school. However, in front of our room, you could see the house where the nuns and priests stay. I never really paid any mind back then, but eventually, that changed. One afternoon, it was already pretty dark. It was almost 6 p.m. at the time, if I remember. While the other kids were cleaning inside the room, I went out to the hallways to clean our window. I took a break and turned around. There, I saw the house. I wanted to rest and lean onto the terrace of our hallways, looking at the sky that was already dark. When I shifted my gaze, I looked at the house again, and there, I saw something just in front of the house. A figure, something, or someone, covered in a white cloth. You really can't see anything besides its shape and color, which looked like a human to me, just covered in a white blanket. I frowned and thought it was a little weird. I heard the door from our classroom open and turned to see my friend, who we'll call Carrie. "Carrie, look!" I whisper-shouted to her and pointed down to where I saw the weird figure. I looked back quickly and it was gone. That's when I felt chills down my spine. I wasn't scared until it disappeared. I was stunned, and my heart was racing. It was just there. Where did it go? "What's up?" she asked me, and I snapped out of my thoughts. I don't remember if I told her that I saw something, or I just shrugged it off, because all I can remember is the fear I felt. But on my way home, I was so scared and confused. What was that thing? Was it a hallucination of mine? How did it disappear so quickly? The next week, when it was Monday again, and I was assigned as one of the cleaners, I looked to where I saw that thing, and there was nothing. Until I glanced at the window and saw it again. No face, no anything, just a figure covered in a white blanket. I really didn't want to point it out to my friend again, so I just kept my mouth shut and ran back inside our classroom. The noise my friends were making while cleaning calmed me somehow. To this day, I still don't know what that thing is. But every time I remember the rumors about the house, my brain can't help but think that it might be one of the dead nuns. I live in the Philippines, and at the time this story started, it was 4:30 or so in the afternoon on December 30th, and my father had gone to buy something in the next town. In that town, many fresh ingredients are available at the market, like as fresh as you can get. He was fetching something we needed for our New Year preparations. As my father waved goodbye to us, my sister, Mika, sighed and sounded worried about him. I was confused because she would always want to go everywhere with my father. I didn't think much of it, so we waved goodbye and went back to doing whatever we were doing. Around 5 o'clock, it was getting dark quickly. There was no sunset. It went from light to completely dark very quickly. I was starting to get worried that he wasn't back yet. You see, my mom was not home, as she works overseas, and I was the only one who was responsible for looking after my sister when my dad went to the next town over. I was dancing in our living room for no particular reason, just dancing out of boredom, when suddenly, my sister Mika came running to me with a worried face. She said something that even now gives me the creeps. My sister said, "Ate, Papa's mouth is covered with tape and his hands are tied to his back." Then she started explaining it to me, while acting out how she saw it. I was shocked. I turned the speaker off and picked up my phone and checked my messages to see if my dad had called and left a message. But there was nothing. I was panicking and contacted my mom and my mom's boyfriend at the time to tell them what my sister had just said. After several minutes of waiting, I heard my dad's motorcycle in the driveway. I ran out and hugged him and almost cried when I saw him unharmed. But that is not the end of this story, actually. When we were eating, my dad explained why he was late. He said that while he was driving, he suddenly saw a huge crowd on the road. Of course, he grew anxious and tried to figure out what was happening. Eventually, he learned that there were 2 people on the road, dead. What was worse, he said that their hands were tied and there was tape on their mouths, and they had both been shot in the back of the head. I was in shock and ended up explaining what my sister said to me. He took it as a joke, but I did not. I mean, how could my 3-year-old sister know that stuff? Like getting tied up and having your mouth taped. Maybe because of movies or TV? It's just that I don't think so. She hates watching TV. My name is Kimberly, and I'm 19 years old. I have light brown skin, brown eyes, and shoulder-length black hair. I want to share my personal scary story that happened to me 2 years ago. It was a Friday, and I had just come home from school. I greeted my mom as she was leaving for work, and she told me to not wait up for her since she would be coming home late. My dad left us when I was a baby, and since then, it's only been my mom and I. I told her okay, and she left. I went upstairs and changed into my comfy clothes and went back downstairs into the kitchen, where I started cooking dinner for me and her to eat when she came home from work. After cooking, I did a little bit of chores, took a shower, ate dinner, and checked all the doors and windows to make sure that they were locked. When I was finished cleaning up, I went into the living room with my computer, as I wanted to catch up on some of the shows that I had missed recently. About 3 hours into watching my show, I heard our main door being opened and closed. I thought it was my mom, so I didn't pay attention and went back to watching my show. I had headphones in, so I couldn't hear my mom talking to me. Normally, she would have to come over to me, and that's when I felt someone was leaning over the couch I was sitting on. As I slowly lifted my head, I saw my mom looking down at me with her eyes open unnaturally wide and staring at me immensely. I asked her what was wrong, but she didn't respond, and as I kept looking at her, I felt like something was off about her. I couldn't tell exactly, but I just felt off about her. As I looked closely, I saw she wasn't wearing her nurse scrubs. I figured she probably went upstairs and changed before I could see her. After about 30 seconds of her staring at me, she slowly looked up at the ceiling and back at me, then kissed me on the forehead. Her lips were so cold, it felt like she had put ice on her lips and left it on until they were frozen. Then she walked into the kitchen, and I couldn't see her from where I was sitting. I didn't think anything about it and went back to watching my show. Then the realization hit me. I remembered she told me that she would be coming home late and not to wait up. I also remembered that she isn't a person who would come up to me like that and kiss me on the forehead. She had never done it since I was a baby, as long as I could remember. I was frozen for a minute, then I slowly picked up my phone and called her, hoping I would hear it ringing in the house somewhere. She picked up and asked me what was wrong. I asked her if she was home, but she said no and asked me if I was all right. I told her someone was in the house. I didn't tell her I saw her or something pretending to be her, but she told me to run to our next door neighbor while she called the police. She hung up to call them, and I got up and ran. When I was at the main door to go outside, I looked back into the hallway. It was her, in the dark. She was just standing there. I ran to our neighbor and knocked loudly. She opened up and let me in. I told her someone was in our house. After about 5 minutes of waiting for the police, I heard them coming. I was outside with my neighbor while we watched the cops entering my house. About 10 minutes later, a cop came up to me saying they didn't find anything or any trace of anyone trying to enter the house. I waited at my neighbor's house until late when my mom came home. It's been 2 years since this traumatizing event happened to me. We moved out of there a year ago, and I never told anyone, not even my mom, that I saw her doppelganger.